Welcome everyone, and thanks for joining us. Spring is one of my favorite seasons. I like to say that, but along with all the other seasons as well. Joy to be here, and thanks to Bryn for everything. I hope to present some wonderful slides for you, some anecdotes and some little tidbits of knowledge I've gathered along the way. Being heralded as a naturalist is somewhat interesting. Most naturalists I know, they know the names of every single thing in Latin, and me, I'm more an appreciator of nature, and have since I was a little crawling little toddler. Here we're looking at a crocus. I asked a senior friend of mine we might meet later. He's 93 years old, and I asked him what his favorite springtime noticing, and he said the crocuses. He said the snowdrops come first, but the crocuses, they always bring me hope, which is very interesting. So that brings up his little hobby in the world for the last 93, or maybe not 93 years, but most of his life he's practiced what they call phenology, which is the study of the shifting of seasons and the keeping track of when things happen. So him being 93, he's still sharp as a tack. I can ask him, when did the swallows come back last year? And he'll tell me the exact date for last year and the year before. And he keeps this in his mind, but also on his calendar, which goes way back. This also has some histories back in the 1730s, and in Britain, there was a man named Robert Marsh who published the 21 Indications of Spring. And also over in the Harvard Forest in Petersham, there's a phenology trail where you can walk and things are tracked meticulously, as well as they have cameras up in the canopy watching for leaf bud out and how long the leaves take to form. And they're showing that trees are becoming a little bit more efficient in their growth as they go along and adapt to how the changes are happening. Having a hard time switching to the next slide, and I have no idea why. Bear with me, there we are. Some days you need a little preview of spring. This was after the walk yesterday. I stopped in at Mahoney's in Sudbury to get some seed starting supplies. And here is spring. A little early, I might get to meet Carl, the majestic cactus, but also the employees, they're all bright and sunny and happy. And how could they not be? They get to work in this environment. And this one woman in particular who is checking out my purchases, I asked her, what is your favorite indication of spring? And she said, when my strawberries poke out of the ground. And I said, oh, that's wonderful. I love strawberries. She goes, well, I've never tasted any of them because my dog Finley has learned the art of plucking a strawberry perfectly off the vine. So she saves them for her dog. But when she was telling me this, she was just, so alive. And that shows, springtime for many of us is that awakening. And if you get a chance, pop in and check out their flowers. Onward to the nature here, we have the snowdrops that can burst up right literally through the snow. And they're oftentimes the first bloom we see in our area anyway. They're stunning and always bring a smile for sure. And the skunk cabbage is a fascinating plant. This skunk cabbage generates its own heat. And through the root system and the root mass, the energy it's stored from last year, it can generate up to 70 degrees. This tends to melt the snow around the plant and allow it to burst through the ground. And then the heat also helps the vapors, the smell of the skunk cabbage to waft through the air, attract the flies to the cabbage and to pollinate the flower. So not one that we want on our dinner plates, but I'm told that the bears will nibble the early growth, and that the Native Americans use this plant for medicine, for coughs especially. So One of my favorite flowers here, the dandelions. The thing about spring is it's not so abrupt. It's more a smooth, even change that seems to be orchestrated by some unknown conductor. But the blooms come in time for the bees and the insects, and the birds will come in time for their food source. Quite amazing to witness. We have a magnolia up on the left, first flowering trees that we'll see. And then soon the dogwoods down below here, we'll see them flower. So one of the questions you might have is, how do they know it's spring? The trees, they can see the light coming down. They can sense the quality of the light. They can sense the duration of the light. And when it's just right, and the angle of the sun is just right, it's time to pop that bloom open, It'll take energy from stored in the roots from last year and help to blossom open. It doesn't always come perfectly, sometimes the timing's off and we will lose like a peach harvest or an apple harvest because another frost will come, but she tends to do the best she can. So that was more the perennial plants with root systems that store energy. Another strategy the plants use to reproduce here is through seeds. We all know seeds. I have my collection of seed catalogs here, which is one of my first indications of spring. And I spend many an evening pursuing them, perusing them, and then ordering way more than my share, and then trying to gift them to everybody. But the seeds come in many different flavors, and one of the qualities of seeds is many of them need a stratification, it's called, where they have to go through a period of cold, sometimes a damp cold. And this is said to have prevented them from sprouting too early. So they sense the time and the duration of cold, and then they will sprout. So we can fake the seeds out a bit by putting them in a freezer, sometimes with some peat moss and some other plants out west of here, in the western part of the country. They need actual heat to stratify. They need fire for the tree seeds to go. So we have the root system, the germination, and the sprout. The first few leaves are still, learning how to feed. And then the photosynthesis begins and we get our blossom. But seeds are just so fascinating. Inside them is the intelligence for how to grow, how to make more seeds. And they just I don't know, they fascinate me. Soon, you may have seen the buckets already on the trees, but the sap is running. And here we have a maple tree, a sugar maple up in the left in the fall. She's doing her thing, showing off her colors. Again, pulling energy from the leaves down into the root system, and it'll store it for the winter. And then when the time is just right and the temperatures are just right, the sap will start to run back up towards the buds. And one of these qualities of this is we don't know exactly how this happens. It's been studied, and there's many theories of how it happens. There's differential pressures inside the tree and the small tubes that run up the outsides of the tree. So the sap will run up to the buds, and the tree is attempting to open the buds and leaf out and flower. So we can tap into the trees here and get some of the sap to come out. When the time is right for this, you'll notice there'll be squirrels running around inside the maple trees up in the branches, and they're looking for little leaks where they can get a little sap of the nectar here. Here's the maple tree flowering. I was talking about the timing earlier. The insects seem to know, and the tree seems to know, and it's time, and the tree will flower, and then the bees will find the tree. It's a very important source of nutrition and nectar for the bees. They've been spending the whole winter in the hive. They just come out for short flights when the temperatures are warm enough, but they tend to eat their stores, and they are quite ready for some new forage. I'm told there's about 400 different native bee species in New England. And that was kind of mind-blowing for me. I had no idea there were that many. I don't think I've seen that many, but I know we have our standards, and one of my joys, the first joy of late spring is when the bumblebees come flying through. I did a little research on them a few years ago and used to follow them around. They, I guess they used to be called humblebees, and someone changed the name along the way to bumblebees because of their awkward flying pattern. So something that needs to be looked into more and more. But one way we can help the bees is to plant some of the flowers that they like to eat. We can talk more about that later, and I have some resources for us all. And there's also housing we can build for the bees. There's the bumblebees tend to go underneath the ground, so there's ways to build little habitats for them, which is very interesting. They use inverted clay pots and some different fillings for the pots, so they have a nice dry place to go and live. But there's also the mason bee houses you'll see, and some of the mud bee houses where they're hollow tubes that people have bundled together. And those can be made or purchased. And again, that will be something I can tap into on the resource sheet. We have our onto the insects in these invertebrates. We have this woolly bear caterpillar here, who is said to be the indicator of how the winter is going to go. And the old theory is how wide the brown part of the caterpillar is how mild the winter is going to be. Or the more black is the more challenging the winter is going to be. And there have been several studies done on this, which is fascinating. But one showed that there was 80% accuracy to the woolly bear size. And then there was a different view of it where it had no semblance at all. So I tend to appreciate the former one first, just because they're such majestic little creatures. And below is the Isabella moth that they become in the springtime when they climb out of where they were hiding and hibernating. They climb up to some place where it's safe for them to pupate and turn into this beautiful moth. So some of the strategies the creatures use to get through the winter and then awaken back into the spring are pretty fascinating. I learned about this creature where I lived prior to here, had this siding that had small gaps in it around the edges and around the seams. And I noticed in the fall, I'd see these wasps flying by with pine needles hanging off of them and small pieces of grass and things. I was wondering what they were doing. So I followed them, and they were landing on the house, climbing up into these little gaps and then dragging pieces of grass inside the house. And I thought, well, I really don't think that I want a wasp nest inside my house, but it seemed to be like a mass nest. So of course I let them be, and I just observed them. And then I learned a little bit more about them. They have this fascinating ability to climb inside these little grooves, and then they pull in grasses where they lay a couple eggs. And then if you look in the upper right-hand corner of the lower right picture here, there's a green spot. Those are grasshoppers. So they drag in food as well. And then when the eggs hatch, the larvae form, and then they have food for the duration of their gestation until they climb out as wasps, which is fascinating. So what I would notice is in the middle of the winter, the birds would seek out these little cavities. They'd see the little grass ends sticking out, and they'd be sticking their beaks in there and pulling out these nests. And by my estimate, at least observing my house, is about 50% of the nests were found by the birds, and about 50% were able to go the full duration. Whatever gets you through the winter, right? Ants are pretty interesting creatures as well, and I really didn't know what was happening with them. I did know that they seal up their holes and just ride out the winters. So I guess they go south, but typically they go down. And in the left-hand side of the frame, you can see an ant nest. And this is a book I got from the library. I had to go to the Worcester Library to get this book called Ant Architecture. And a man's made it his life's mission to follow around ants. And when they vacate the nest, he pours liquid metal down into the nest. And then he excavates the nest very carefully and to maintain the structure. And he studies all these different kinds of ants around the world, and then applies science and architecture ideas to what it is they're doing. They have places where they can do their different daily aspects of life here in their condominium complex. What's really interesting is this spiraling, this helical tunnel all the way down on the left. So the book is worth pursuing. You can get it through the Commonwealth Catalog, the Minuteman Library Network, and they can get the book for you. And there's these nests from all over the world in different flavors, but the ants are ingenious in their designs. Onwards to the amphibians and the reptiles. Here we have a wood frog who has frozen solid. And if I saw this in the woods, I'd be a little concerned for the guy, but I guess this is how they've adapted to ride out our winters. They are able to in their bloodstream, they're able to create this antifreeze that's pushed into their cells. So the way I understand it, the cells themselves don't freeze, but the tissues around the cells freeze. And the wood frogs are able to freeze totally solid and ride out the winter. You can even see the frost on his eyes. There's no pulse, there's no respiration. The being is in complete suspended animation. And then when they do make it to the springtime, I'm told that they thaw out from the inside out, which is another mystery. People have no idea how they do this. But typically you think the warmth would go from the outside in. They're able to warm from the inside out. And then once the heart starts beating, the circulation starts to happen, the rest of the frog will thaw out. And it takes about 10 hours. And I had some technical difficulties embedding a video of this thawing process, but there are several of them, good ones on YouTube that you can look up if you search for wood frog thawing out. More than you need to know will come up. I wonder if it's something that bothers them. It just seems very uncomfortable. But it doesn't hurt them in any way, and they come out ready to breed, ready to do everything they need to do. This is the wood frog in a block of ice, just so solid, frozen. I do have a recording of their call when they're in a better state of being. Here they are. Here he is thawed out. He's laid some eggs. She's laid some eggs, and on the left, lower left, you can see the tadpoles forming. This might be a repeat from if you were in tune with Michelle's presentation the other day, but here's the wood frogs singing their songs. So that sounds familiar to some forward. It's one of the first frogs we'll hear. One of the, I guess the idea of being able to freeze solid anywhere, and it allows them to be closer to their breeding grounds. And it's one advantage that they've adapted to, which helps in their success, and they're very successful. They're certainly challenged by our developments, but they're doing all right. And we have some of the peepers and tree frogs, a little mixture here. These are smaller frogs. They're much shyer. You're less apt to see them. But here's their calls. So pretty exciting that this is on the way to us. I was off hiking with a friend one day, and it was close around to big night, and we were able to sneak up on the vernal pool, and I thought, well, I can get in there and sit real close and listen, and they caught me. And I don't know at what point one of them said, "Shh, human," and they stopped singing, and I felt so bad. I was like, oh, who am I to interrupt them? So we walked away from the pool, and as soon as we got a certain distance away, they started singing again. And I tried one more time. I'm thinking if I can get a little closer, and it was like one step, and they stopped, and then one step back, and they started. So I realized there's some sentinels involved, and they're aware of our presence, or at least they were aware that night of my presence. And I gave it up and let them be after that. So on the move as well, as soon we'll have the temperatures warm enough for these guys to be on the move. We have our spotted salamanders, and from what I understand, they sense the temperature and the light, but it's mainly the temperature and the moistness for them to be able to travel back to the pools where they were born. From what I understand, Bryn has a live vernal pool walk happening this year in person, which should be exciting. And you should be able to see some of these guys. Only at night typically, but last time I saw the ones on the upper left was a nighttime. I was driving through Harvard, Mass, and it was raining, and I had no idea that it was about that time until I saw them on the road. So I stopped my car and got out, and there's one of these spotted salamanders that was almost a foot long crossing the road. So I carefully picked her up and put her on the other side of the road. You always supposed to put them in the direction they're going, I'm told. They have it set in their mind, I'm going that way for a purpose. And so I was able to help that one across the road. Then I made it about 10 feet in the car, and there was another one. And then there's some frogs, and it was a very slow ride home through this patch. I must have been there half an hour, stopping, starting, getting out. And I wish I could have just parked the car and got a flashlight and a vest and you know, stopped traffic and made them safely crossing, which I'm told there's volunteers that do this. And there's a sign up that you could talk to Bryn about with some volunteers for big night once the night is set, but it will be soon. You can go out and help these guys cross the roads. Also, the temperature change will bring out our turtles, the serpents, the water snakes, the land snakes. You can see some fish here in the pond. These turtles love to just climb up on rocks and sun themselves. And I always feel bad when I disturb them. It's great when you can sneak up with the telephoto lens and get them. Where we have the mammals are climbing out of their hibernation soon as well. The hibernation here, this big old bear came and destroyed my bird feeders. And I came around into my backyard with a bag of seed and completely unaware of what was happening, and ran right into this mama bear. And I was about probably 15 feet from her when then I realized that she was there and stopped me in my tracks. Huge. And the closest I've ever been to a bear, and probably the closest I ever want to be to a bear, at least a wild one. And I did my poorest moonwalk backwards, trying not to disturb her, but trying to create some distance between the two of us. And she never lost eye contact with me, and I never lost it with her. I just backed up, showed her respect, and I went into my house. And then I opened the window and I tried to distract her and to I don't know if I was trying to scare her, but just trying to, tell her this is a backyard, this isn't their habitat. And she wasn't having any of it. She just kept chomping away on the bird seed. So here's a mother bear teaching her children about drive-through food. And I'm told that the bears remember, they know exactly where the bird feeders are, and they will come back. So if you do feed the birds, you need to take them in at night when the bears are on the move, or the other mammals here on the move. The foxes, they're about done with their mating season. They've chosen their dens, and now the females are typically with young. On the right, we have our raccoons, which they don't necessarily hibernate all the way. They will come out for food during the winter. But just everyone's more and more active here as the time warms up, humans included, getting out more, and everyone's excited to get started on our gardens. Down on the lower left, we have a porcupine, and they tend to ride out the winter. But what I understand from them, their diet is mostly evergreen tips, and they eat a lot of shrubbery and things like that. But they're always desperate for salt. There's very low sodium in their diet, which is something I should probably learn about. But these guys have been found to lick car tires in the winter, and to find farmers' tools. If you leave a shovel on the ground, they can be found licking the handles of the shovels, trying to get some of the sweat off the handles. So where I lived before I am now, where the wasps were building nests, I lived right on the edge of 10 acres of my friend's property, and I used to wander that land a lot. And I was able to put a few salts out for the critters. And if you have property, and you have the permission, that's one fascinating way to see the wildlife. I'm not sure. It was more called a mineral block, and it held the necessary minerals for livestock and animals. But this was a wildlife one, and I had the little camera set up, and the sensor camera, and it would take these beautiful pictures. These critters coming and taking a little sample of the salt. It was really sweet. Certainly miss my 10 acres, but I only have 2 trees I see out my window, and we make do with what we have, Left the beavers here. They'll be out soon if you haven't seen them already, but they tend to ride out the winter with some branches that they've stored food, and it gets old and stale, and they're ready for some fresh bark. They will start to come out and dine down. The possums are active year-round, but they typically slow way down in the winter. And these are beautiful creatures, sometimes given a bum rap, but they eat a lot of ticks. And they're very, very harmless. They're beautiful creatures, and they're only marsupial, only pouch type animal that carries a young around in their pouch. So you can see they also ride on the top of mama. And you'll be hopefully seeing and not smelling skunks, but they're out and about. onwards to our feathered friends here. Some of the people I queried over the last couple of weeks or so have been asking this question of people, what's your favorite sign of spring? And a lot of them say, you know, I saw my first robin, or I see my first robin. And more people are becoming aware that they typically don't go anywhere. They stay around, at least a good portion of them. And they switch their diet from worms and mostly insects to the berries. They're also masters at letting the berries thaw and freeze, and thaw and freeze. And that softens them, and some of the toxicity can leach out of them, and then they become more palatable. You'll see them band together, and they tend to go deeper in the woods. On the right, there's a cedar waxwing, and they're much more berry eaters as well this time of year. Here's some of the berries that we could plant if we had the land for it. And some of the native ones that we see around here. It's one of the ways we can help wildlife is to plant native plants. I know the Lincoln Conservation Trust has a plant sale. I'm not sure of the date of it yet, but I'll bug Bryn about that. Some of you know. There's also some other organizations that are on that research sheet that you can get from Bryn. Places we get these bushes and plant them and have some more wildlife around. This time of year, you'll notice the birds' plumages change. Some of the more known ones are like the goldfinches will become really bright gold. Here, this is a female cardinal, and her beak is just this vibrant red. They're displaying, you know, for mating, and it seems to be a way of saying I'm in really good condition and ready to make some babies. So this is very attractive to a male when they wear this kind of lipstick. And I'm told the colors from the birds, it kind of makes sense, but it comes from their diet. So all the berries seem to have been paying off. We have turkeys here. The males will start to really turn blue up in the head and neck area. This is the males. And then you can see there's two male turkeys sort of jockeying for the attention of this female. They also expand their feathers out, and the lower ones will drag along the ground and create this rumbling sound. These creatures are ancient. You know, they go way back and have created these adaptations over the years, over the eons. And some of them are still mysteries to us, what it means or why they're doing them. But they know exactly what they're doing and seem to be doing it just fine. Onwards here, we have a couple woodpeckers. These two are often confused. This is the Downy woodpecker and the hairy woodpecker. One way to tell the difference is the hairy woodpecker is typically larger, or always larger, I should say. The beak is typically longer. And if you notice on the back here, on the right side bird, there's these hair-like feathers along the back, and that's the namesake for the hairy. But also you can notice in their calls. So here I have, first on the left, the Downy woodpecker call has very short pauses in between the hammerings, which are done to find food, but also to communicate with each other. Hope you can hear that okay. There's the hairy woodpecker. A longer pause in between the hammerings. Faster hammering. And if you could hear that in the background, there was the response from another bird.
I'm
What I
not
love
sure we
most,
heard
I'm
the
sorry?
Downy. I'm not sure we heard the Downy. Could you play that one again?
Okay, so the Downy woodpecker has shorter intervals in between the hammerings, and the hammerings are not as fast. So here's the Downy again.
I just heard the first one, the first set. But I think people heard that okay.
And then the hairy again has the longer pauses in between the hammers. What I love most about the woodpeckers is how they create habitat and nesting sites for other animals, birds especially, but also squirrels and insects. And one thing they do is in their beaks, they're transmitting fungal spores into trees as well. So pretty ingenious way of getting around these spores, but like little birds like the chickadees and things like that can use the old woodpecker holes for nest sites and also for roosting sites in the winter. So the other thing you'll notice is the birds will start to be nicer to each other. They'll be feeding each other. Here's a cardinal pair that I've known for a few years. The males become so sweet and love to share food, and they've been known to feed small birds and females of other species even. They just can't help themselves. They just become all giving this time of year. We have some bluebirds. One of their ways of riding through the winter is to mass together, and they take turns who's on top, who's in the outside, almost like bees. And on really cold nights, they can be found inside these cavities and nest boxes and things, trying to get through the night. A couple chickadees here. We have the chickadees change their call as well. They have the chickadee, D sound that we know. What's different is the D sound is variable depending on what they're trying to communicate. And they can call it all the coast is clear with one D, or multiple Ds can talk about a threat or something. Especially if they see an owl, a small owl nearby. And I'm told the world record for amount of Ds in a chickadee's call is 23 times. Someone noticed a chickadee sound, and there was a small pygmy owl that was very close to them. And that freaked them out a little bit. So in the springtime, you'll notice their call changes to more the seesaw sound. It's called Phoebe in the bird world. And I do have a recording of that. Here's the sound that we know so well. I'm told there's 16 different variations on this. And this one is more territorial. And I've noticed they're already making this sound. So they're already, spacing out where they're going to raise their young. And they're communicating that to the other birds. My digs here. They still haven't abandoned the DDD sound. I don't think I've quite heard 23 times, but I'll be listening more carefully now that I've heard that. This is D. I call her D, but she lived back at the place where I had the siding and the interesting wasps. And she would follow me to the mailbox, and she would let me know when the feeders needed attention. And she also would scold anyone else who came in my yard. If someone came up and talked to me in my yard, she'd land nearby and just chirp right away at them. And I just thought that it was quite endearing that she was partial to me, or maybe she was welcoming my neighbor, but it just seemed to be scolding, because the noise went away as soon as the person went away. Particular springtime nesting habit of tufted titmice is to use animal fur in their nesting. And this is something I've been able to see a couple times. This is not my film, but if you notice, there she is. And she's stealing fur off this raccoon's back. So I had some planters in my yard, and they had this artificial, or I guess it was natural, but it was this woven material inside that held the soil inside of the basket. And this tufted titmice would land on that and would take these fibers, and they were almost like fur, but not quite. And they were sticking a nest box down around the house for me, and I was able to investigate and see that they incorporated that into their nests. This is a tufted titmouse in the nest box, and you can see they've used mostly moss materials, but then they weave this animal fur, which they can steal from deer and any dogs or anyone happens to be in their territory, and make it nice and soft and beautiful inside. A bit messy, but if you've ever had the pleasure of having them nest in your yard, they're really wonderful birds. This is a photo Elizabeth allowed me to share. Fascinating. I've never seen this before, but it is a red-headed woodpecker, a red-bellied woodpecker, and he's pecking a hole and then putting her ear up to the wood. I don't know, I was just taken by this photo. It's very endearing to see the one all the way on the right there, where the bird's listening carefully for the insect moving inside. So how can we help? Back when I was a kid, Ranger Rick was all the rage. Everyone had the magazines, and I guess he's still with us and still active. And there's this group called Garden for Wildlife, which is about half the nation. They supply pollinator-friendly plants and native plants and bird-friendly plants, and able to research what's good for your area and when you should plant it, how you could plant it. And another sister organization of theirs will actually sell these signs you can put up in your yard. I've seen them in Stowe. You can get your yard certified as a wildlife habitat. They give you the guidelines to go by as far as providing food, water, shelter, things like that for the bird. I realized we wanted to allow some time for questions. Did you have questions, Bryn? I've been just rambling on here, and I have a few more slides I could share, but were there any questions anyone had about any of the particular?
Yeah, we could, why don't we pause here and see if there's a few questions, and then if there aren't, we have a little time to finish up the rest of your slides.
Sure, I'd be glad to try to answer any.
People can be welcome to put it in the chat, or if you use the reactions to raise your hand, we can call on you as well. Looks like we had a question. Do you know if all amphibians can sort of create that antifreeze, or is it just wood frogs or some frogs that the antifreeze that helps them survive the winter?
I know that the peepers do as well. and some of the tree frogs. I'm not sure of the others. I know that they have qualities of being able to sustain cold, but I think that being able to freeze solid is pretty unique to the frogs. I know that, you know, turtles and will burrow underneath the mud deep down in a pond. I don't believe that they can survive a freezing. And in the salamanders, they can take cold, but I don't believe they can freeze solid. I may be wrong on that, so I don't have a definitive answer. But I will be researching that for sure. Yeah, I
Yeah,
believe
it'd be
it's pretty unique
fascinating
to the
to
wood.
know. Yeah.
I believe it is unique to the wood frog.
Josh had a great comment here. He read that frogs cross the road in 13 seconds, but salamanders take 88 seconds,
Really?
which is possibly puts them at higher risk for getting hit by a car when they're crossing on big night. That's really interesting.
Yeah, so we need more volunteers when you have your night and there is a sign up sheet for that, is there?
Yeah, so the town conservation and the land trust are doing a joint sign up, and part of that is to have the volunteers read through some materials about how to participate safely and make sure that no people or amphibians are harmed. We want to make sure that we're being beneficial to them if we're out there at night.
Yeah, they can be hard to see. Some of them are really small and some of them are very large, but they also hide under things. And sometimes they're under a leaf and you don't know they're there and you're not just stepping on a leaf. I had all these notes that I had made and I didn't look at them, not even once. So I skipped over so much I wanted to share with you all. The salamanders can live a long time. They can live 20, 30 years, are larger salamanders. And then I'm told that in Asia, there's some salamanders that live over 40 years. And that's as far as they've measured. Some of the chickadees can live a dozen years or so. But they're, you know, life for them is pretty precarious and dangerous, but some of them have been tagged and have lived a dozen years or so. So this is what brings up this slide. When you notice a creature, you know, an animal, being, they're unique, they're individuals, and they have a life and they have preferences and what they like, what they don't like, where they like to nest. They have friends and buddies, and just a deeper appreciation. That's one of my reasons why I like to give these presentations and walks in nature, is to help people not so much learn all the particulars and become a master naturalist, but more this appreciation for nature. And if we love nature, then we're more apt to protect nature. So
yeah, that's great.
that's my deal.
I love that way of framing it, because I think you're right. We do often get bogged down in the details and miss the big picture.
Yeah. I had a bit of a flood and I lost most of my identification books, like actually all of them. And I was just gifted one. Now I have one bird ID book, but I had quite a collection of identification guides for you know, individual for species of dragonflies and damselflies and butterflies. I had all the a whole series of books, and they're all gone. And in a way, I don't miss them, because sometimes I can just go and observe without having to look it up and find the name and all the particulars, and just appreciate the beauty, you know. Did I interrupt you? You were about to say something.
No, we had 2 more questions.
Oh, sure.
So maybe we can do those really quickly, and then maybe you'd like to close with your last slide there.
Oh, sure.
Okay.
What were the questions?
So Martha was asking about some resources for pollinator gardens. Actually, maybe I can answer that, and that John has prepared a resource page that we'll email out after the program, along with the recording, that has some links.
Yes, exactly. There's a couple sources, plus there's a reminder to ask you about when your plant sale will be.
Yeah, we haven't finalized the dates yet, but we're hoping to have that information available in the next few weeks.
Yeah, so there's a PDF that you'll be able to, it'll be emailed to you, I believe. So you can open that and find some sources.
And then Carol had a nice comment and question. She has bird feeders on her second story porch, and she gets lots of birds, including mourning doves this year, who she thought mostly like to feed on the ground. Do you
Typically
know
they do.
anything about why they would have come to second story feeder?
No, unless there's nothing on the ground for them. The mourning doves are very resourceful, and they don't like to perch on a feeder, but they will, especially if it's like a basket feeder. But I've seen them clinging on perches and trying to get some food out of the feeder. So what's on the ground isn't palatable to them, or not enough for them, or the squirrels are chasing them off, or there's a cat there, or something might be happening. But I know they do like corn and some of the smaller seeds. They're beautiful birds, and I'm told that they're very poor nest makers. So their nests are very crude and balance of sticks, and they just look very, very unsafe and are, but that's just their nature, I guess. They don't put a lot of credence in this. Some of the particular birds are just gorgeous, beautiful works of weaving and art, and theirs are just this, that's good enough, let's go for it. So, but this is, unless there's any other questions, I can introduce you to Ray. Some of you might have known Ray. I talk about him all the time, but he's one of my dearest friends, a mentor of mine, and he's 93 now. And I say 93 years young because he's so sharp and in so many ways. And I don't know, I can't speak highly enough for him, his integrity, but also his knowledge about nature and the birds, especially. His great love is the bluebirds. And for probably, well, I'd say just over 60 years now, or almost 60 years, he's been putting up nest boxes and taking good care of them. We care for a whole series of them now. He told me that it took him 2 years to see his first bluebird after he started putting boxes up. So he also has a tenacity. I was able to find this book here on birds' nests at the library, and had a paragraph in it about the success of the bluebird boxes. When he was starting out, they were almost extinct. And he had read an article in the Reader's Digest that said, you know, watch out for the bluebirds, they're almost gone. And that was his impetus to be involved in this project. And then he basically devoted his life to it. So here he is reading about the success of the bluebird nesting, which makes him very happy. And more and more I'm hearing from people that this is the first time they've seen bluebirds in their yard, and they're amazed. And when I ever report this back to Ray, he's very happy to hear that. And I sort of project onto him, you know, that this is a lot of your doing, because he's influenced so many people over the years to put up the boxes. So here he is.
3. Bluebird nest box success. One of the best success stories in nature is the replenishment of the eastern bluebird in the early 900s. The population of this beautiful songbird was at an all-time low due to lack of natural nesting cavities. Many thousands of bird enthusiasts have put up bluebird nest boxes since then, and today the population of the blue jewel is strong and healthy. Eastern bluebirds usually gather dried grasses for their nests. Sometimes they use other natural material that are more readily available. On several occasions, I discovered bluebird nests made with pine needles. It's always easy to identify eastern bluebird nests because each one is built with just one type of material. And there's a picture of the bluebirds at one of their boxes.
So yeah, that's Ray, and he's very happy. he emails me daily with his bird counts and his study of nature, and wonderful man. Soon we'll see the chipmunks as well. They're popping their heads out. I saw my last one, my first one last year on March 5th. They may show it earlier. So some of the ways that we can help with the wildlife is to not be so fastidious in your gardens. If you do grow flowers and vegetables, when something bolts and goes to seed and puts flower sacks up, typically the farmer's answer to that is to pull them out. If you leave them, it's food for the bees, the insects, the butterflies, and then the seeds are also important food source in the fall for the critters and seed eaters. To not rake all of your leaves. If you have some property where you can leave the leaves, a lot of insects overwinter in the leaf masses, along with the salamanders and some of the other critters. A brush pile is a great insect hotel if there's any space on your property to just pile some brush up. There's designs for this online where you put some logs and firewood type logs on the bottom, and then start to cover with different size brush branches and create a big mass, and all kinds of creatures can live down under there. If you do lawn care, choose natural lawn care versus the chemicals and the pesticides and herbicides, or just let it be, not pull out the dandelions, let them go. What else do we have? I have some notes. To plant the native plants, research and maybe plant some berry bushes on your property, flowering trees, and some other ideas on that resource sheet. And close here with Chippy. There's a man who has this chipper who he calls Squidgy, who lives under this little thing here.
And we're going to see if the Squishy's here. Squishy!
He's a little annoying.
Squishy! It's Squishy!
We have our trained,
My sweet baby's back.
our trained chipmunk.
You're the chicky Squishy. You did it.
Or is the human trained, I guess.
Look at that Squishy.
How many can he fit? All right. So Bren, thank you. Were there any more questions to finish up, or have I taken enough time?
Well, thank you, John. I don't see any more questions. That was really wonderful. I think we're all now just waiting in anticipation for that next warm day, warm sunny day.
Soon enough. Yeah.
Yeah.
And big night.
I know the snowdrops had started to come up, but we're now underneath the snow again. So hopefully when that melts, they'll be in full bloom.
I think it's a warming trend, and I'm hoping, that was winter's last gasp, but she surprises us now and then. And I'm hoping for the apple crop and the peach crop, and all the farmers are crossing their fingers. But yeah, I hope everyone can get out there and enjoy the day, enjoy the spring, and typically, again, not to try to memorize all these facts, but more appreciation, just enjoy and notice more. Because I whizzed over this, but in Asia, they separate the seasons into 72 distinct individual seasons. And if you think about it, we have many more than that. So there is an application you can look up on your phone, actually, and it'll tell you what the season is in Asia. And they're quite romantic. It's like the geese have arrived and there's mist on the lake, and that'll be a season. And the old ancient naturalists back to like the 1500s would note these different changes of how the critters are coming and going, and how the spring basically unfolds into summer, into autumn, into winter, and then back into spring. So it's not so much abrupt, it's a smooth, even unfolding.
That's a wonderful way of looking at it.
Yeah, so look up the 72 seasons. It's pretty interesting. Yeah.
Thank you, John. Thank you, everybody, for joining us this afternoon. And
Glad to be with you all, and thanks. Appreciate it, Corinne. All right,
have a
bye-bye.
wonderful day, everyone.